Hi guys, it is Poober here for episode 33 of my Factorio series. The last 33 episodes have really been building up to a 5 rocket per minute base. At this point, I've got a decent factory set up for space science and the satellite and all of the components that go into it, but I haven't yet started on all of the other sciences at 5,000 per minute, so that is what I'm going to be starting today. Welcome to a fresh new creative world. The reason why we're starting in something brand new is because all of my other creative saves are actually dipping in my FPS and UPS. In fact, the one I was working in most recently is down to about 32 FPS and UPS, which is obviously not ideal. So I wanted to start out fresh so I can showcase my science designs that I have been working on for the last couple of hours. So I've got this blueprint book here. This is my Poober's Book of Mega Science. I will make this available to you guys after the Factorio series is done, but for now I wanted to go over this and just showcase what I've been working on, starting with red science. So I'm going to go ahead and plop that down first. Here is a pretty wide area. We can do that. So you'll notice that a lot of these designs are actually kind of very similar in nature. They all take on a very similar shape between them. We've got basically a 10 beacon arrangement around all of the single assemblers if possible. All of the beacons have speed 3 modules, and then all of the assemblers have productivity 3 modules unless they are an intermediate product, in which case those will take speed 3 modules instead. So these should cover red through the yellow science. Of course, this does not include space science, since that is what I've basically worked up to with all of my other episodes at this point. But let's go ahead and we'll actually give this power so you guys can see at least the first iteration of my red science. And here we go. This should turn it on. And one big reason why I do creative versions of my builds beforehand is to do a lot of testing first. So this will start working, but let me go ahead and take a look at the production statistics real quick so we can measure out just how much we're producing, because that is ultimately what is really important to me. So we're beginning to build up here, but the goal will be 5,000 per minute, but theoretically this should do, I believe, 5.1 per minute. I did put in the rate with the name of the blueprint here. So this one will do 5.1 thousand red science per minute. And so how I have that set up is that I have 2 rows of the iron gear wheels, and that consists of 6 columns. And then I basically have, I think it's 6 rows of the red science assemblers following that. So in total, this does 5.1 thousand red science per minute, give or take a couple hundred, I think, but it's pretty stable in terms of my creative world testing. So to talk about the red science, how this works is this one is very easy. All it takes is 2 components, and at that, it only requires basically 1 row to the left of the copper plate. The other row is for the iron gear wheels. And it's not very difficult in terms of this build, but it definitely does get more complicated the further on we get with the science. Before we move on to the green, let's take a look at the minute graph. And here you can see we are sitting at a solid 5 to 5.1 thousand red science per minute. Now let's take a look at the green. So green science, we'll go ahead and plot that down right next to our red. This build is obviously a little bit bigger than the red science, and let's go ahead and give this one power as well. But this is also 6 columns worth, but it is significantly longer. Let's see, in terms of how many actual assemblers are devoted to the green science, that is 6 by 8. So it looks like 48 assemblers to green science, minus these 2 on the bottom corners are actually belts, so it's actually 46 for the green science. And then the columns and rows above that consist of the inserters and the iron gear wheels just above that. So it's a very similar setup, like I mentioned, to the red science build, but the difference with this is that I have all of the subcomponents kind of built in. So starting at the top, we have iron feeding into the iron gear wheels. This gets dropped off into the right lane, which gets fed down. This gets fed into the yellow inserters, which then get fed via a separate belt lane, which is on the same side, that eventually get on into the green science assemblers themselves. So that was a cool trick I did, was divvying up, or at least placing down multiple lanes of belts on the same side, which is a little bit difficult to do when we're this short on space with this type of setup, but I was able to make it work. And then, of course, we've got all of the rest of the assemblers for the green science here, and then the belts over here. It just actually takes 2 of these, so we've got one over here to the corner, and this one over here to the right-hand corner, and then these are divided up between the 6 columns. And amazingly, it still does get it all the way to the end of every green science assembler, so it does get evenly distributed. And taking a look at the green science production statistics, let's do that real quick. Over the 1 minute interval, we are at a solid 5.1 thousand green science per minute, which is technically above my goal. But I did want to err on the side of producing too much instead of too little, which is why I'd rather produce closer to 5.1 instead of 4.9 or 5,000. So this number I'm really happy with. Moving on to blue, that is this guy here. There we go. Let's take a look at it in the blueprint mode. Obviously, you can't really tell a whole lot what is going on because this is such a huge factory. There's a lot of multiple components that go into several subcomponents into finally the blue science build itself. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and plop that down and get out of the way. And keep in mind, right now I'm at 60 FPS, or at least I was before planting this factory down. But at this point, I'm imagining is where I'm probably going to begin dropping frames. So now I've turned that on. Let's start from top and go to the bottom and add in a couple more of the power stations as needed. So from the top is where I plan on having my steel coming in via train, and this will come into a couple rows of our pipes. I think it covers, let's see, it's 9 columns worth, I believe. And then I've got this row of iron gear wheels that feeds into the engines just below them. And one weird thing I've got going on is just to show you how I've divvied up the belts here. So this is the input line for the steel, this is the output line for the pipe. So steel is still moving down, pipes are now moving down as the product, and then those get fed into the engines. The steel is still getting accessed by the engine assemblers here. And then these finally get carried down as the engine product down past this train station here. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, but how this is meant to work, let's go ahead and grab a couple creative components here. This is where we'll be having trains come in to supply our red circuits. So we will have a red circuit component into these trains, and then we need some bots. I think we'll only need about 100 or so, but I think I'll do 200 just to be on the safe side. Oh, and I apparently forgot to turn off fighters, so let me do that now, since this is just such a fresh new map. But now I can go ahead and put the bots into the robo-bays. They're going to start delivering the red circuits into the boxes here, but you can see this is where I have the engines getting picked up from the passive provider boxes, and then they go adjacently pretty much into the boxes nearby. So not a very far trip, but I thought that would be allowing better distribution more evenly, and it would do it in much more compressed space than doing it via belts. Plus it might be more UPS friendly. It's really kind of half of one, it doesn't have the other compared to bots via belts at this point. But anyway, we now have the engines getting fed into the boxes here along with red circuits, and then these get fed into the blue science assemblers themselves. So the reason why this setup hasn't turned on yet is because we're still waiting for the other components here at the bottom which require power. So let me turn this section on now. Now this whole bottom half is for the electric mining drills. Here at the bottom is where I'm going to be having my iron gear wheels, green circuits, and iron plate getting dropped off via train. Each one of these columns, and like I said, there are 9 columns here, will take 2 belts worth of the iron plate, which is a heck of a lot. 1 full belt of the green circuits and 1 full belt of the iron gear wheels. So this will be very intensive in terms of how much of the products it is eating. But these will get fed along the line. It goes, let's see, how far is it? There's 4 rows worth, it looks like, of the miners, so that is 36 miners total. The product then gets fed into the middle lane, which then gets directly fed into the blue science assemblers. So between that we have the red circuits on the left, the engines on the right, and then the miners in the middle. And then the output of the blue science goes just above the assembler and feeding into the right. So over here on the right hand side is where I'm going to be having trains pick up the blue science packs. Now that the factory is fully up and running, let's take a look at these statistics as well. Here is the blue science at, looks like 4.7 over the 1 minute interval, but it is increasing since it hasn't been fully up and running for a full minute yet. The 5-second interval is holding steady about 4.9, but let's go back to the 1 minute, and we're holding steady at, looks like, about 4.9. I did plan for this to be 5,000 per minute, but I'm guessing it might just not be fully up and running quite yet. But when it is, it does do a solid 5,000 per minute according to my creative mode calculations. And here you can see it's finally hitting that 5,000 per minute mark. It's probably not going to quite hit it yet on the minute interval unless we kind of just sit here and let it run its course. But it is good to know that it still does work even in this version of creative mode. And I thought blue science was big. Well, wait until you see my purple science. This thing is a monster. So I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit further here. And we'll plop this down. Looks like it's a little bit shorter than my blue science actually. But there we go. There is a lot going on here, so we'll again start at the top and work our way down. Let's start by placing in a power source though. So starting with the inputs, we have steel that will be fed in from the top along with red circuits through the middle lane, and then 2 belts worth of the stone bricks to the right hand side of this little tile here. Between all of these resources, they only feed into my first couple of rows that I have here. Looks like I have this expanding at 6 rows at 7 columns wide, so there are 42 of the assemblers. Now I needed 2 lanes worth of steel and stone brick. It looks like I kind of goofed here though, so let me fix that real quick. But the reason why I need 2 is because with only 1 lane of each of the products, it doesn't quite make it to the end, so you do need 2 lanes worth of the steel and the stone brick to be able to fully compress these products and get the rate up of production that we need. So let's go ahead down to the bottom now, because our purple science and everything else is not turned on quite yet because I have to go ahead and give this thing some power. So now that I've given this power, everything else should turn on as a result of this working. So now starting from the bottom and going up, we have 1 row of my regular pipe, and the pipe feeds in to the right hand side of the other tiles here. It feeds up into the engines. Meanwhile, in between that, we have iron gear wheels that feed into the left-hand side. So by that point, the engines receive the iron gear wheels and the pipe from the right, as well as steel that was fed also from the bottom here into the engines themselves. So we've got 3 rows worth of engines. Again, this is at 7 columns, so there are 21 engines feeding into the electric engines just above the regular engine unit factory. In between that though, we do have a train station. This is for dropping off green circuits, so let's go ahead and add this in now. And we'll duplicate that. Maybe, there we go. And let's grab a couple bots. Okay, so we'll have a train come in here to deliver the green circuits into the electric engine unit setup. We should only need a 2-for-2 train, I imagine, because according to my calculations, this should be enough to feed everything, but I will have bots supplying from the train into these requester boxes nearby. We'll have green circuits feeding into the left-hand side, whereas the regular engines will feed in through the middle. Lube will feed in from the top, and then the product of the electric engines will go into the right-hand side. So let's follow the product down. Eventually, this is how it makes its way into the purple science area. I do want to mention real quick that sometimes these builds have a little bit of waste, as you can see here. Like this line has these 4 electric engines, or 5 or so, that will never actually get used because it just ends up sitting here as a result of how the belt is distributed. I unfortunately decided to go with this instead of distributing the belt line easier, or more efficiently rather, without the waste, to allow for having the lights set up. So this way we do get symmetrical and even distribution of all of the lights between the tiles. But like I said, eventually, so the electric engines get fed in from the bottom and going to the right-hand side of the purple science. Meanwhile, as you guys remember, the electric furnaces are in the left-hand lane coming from the top, and that covers all of the products needed for the purple science. Taking a look at the production statistics, we are at 5.2 thousand per minute, so this, it looks like, is producing more than anything else at this point for my science. Alright, now we are moving on to the yellow science, which I think is one of the easier science to have set up because it really doesn't take a whole lot, at least in my opinion, doesn't take as many things as the other sciences tend to do because of all of the components required for the subcomponents and so on. But the yellow science, we'll go ahead and place it down just adjacent, and you can see just how small it is compared to my blue and purple science. So right here should do just fine. Now, like I said, this is a little bit simpler than my other 2 builds I just showed. All this really takes are the copper wires going in from the top, and then we have batteries that will feed into this eventually, which I'll need a build for that. And then we'll have the blue circuits feed into the yellow science as well, along with the Speed 1 modules, which I have sharing a lane with the batteries. So let's turn this on just to double check the statistics as well. Now the left-hand side is where I have the copper plate feeding in to the copper wire assemblers. And one other weird thing is that this doesn't take on quite the same configuration that all of my other builds do. Not quite as great beacon coverage with this setup, but I still should be able to get the 5,000 yellow science per minute with this build. And then finally, I'm back in my other creative mode save for discussion of the military science. Now the reason why I'm starting over here is because there are a lot of subcomponents that go into each other subcomponent that go into the military science. So starting with the ammo, for instance, we have the piercing rounds that require the regular ammo. So we've got the regular ammo feeding into the piercing ammo from here, and multiple train stops I've got set up for that. And then the ammo will feed into the top of the military science. And then over here at the bottom is a mock-up of my other factories required for the military science. So we've got the turrets over here to the left, and then the grenades over here to the right. And somehow I have got to figure out configurations for the train systems that will be coming in to feed all of the supplies that go into these other sub-factories that eventually get into the military science. But when it is all said and done, theoretically we'll have 1 lane worth for each product. So 1 lane over here to the left for the piercing ammo, 1 here to the middle for the turrets, and the other one here to the right will be for the grenades. Of course, the product will feed into the top belt lane over here, which will feed from left to right. Where to the right-hand side, I'll also have pickup of the military science eventually that will carry these on to some labs in the future. So for right now, the military science is kind of the factory that is mostly up in the air in terms of how I have it laid out, because I don't quite have all of the pieces working together quite yet. But overall, I'm very happy with all of my factories at this point, they all produce 5,000 at least science per minute. Let's take a look over here where at this point I'm at 31, 32 FPS and UPS. But even with this frame rate, I am still hopefully hovering at a solid at least 5,000 per minute, which I am. So let's take a look at the 1 minute interval and get rid of the irrelevant stuff. So even in my very UPS and FPS unfriendly world, which is the world we're in right now, I'm hovering at above 5,000 for every science pack, apart from space science, of course. So now all I have to do is hopefully apply this to my real world. Of course, this is all in theory. We have to see how this works once it's in pure vanilla. So that will be my next objective, which I cannot guarantee I will get done in the very near future, but hopefully some point in the foreseeable future. I do want to have my base done by October at the latest. That will be a year by the time I released my last Factorio base tour, so I would be very thankful to have another one done by that time, just for kind of nice sentimental and poetic reasons for that. But I think for now I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I know it's fairly short and not much getting done in terms of the base today, but I wanted you guys to know what I was planning in terms of the science and the future of the base. So for now, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a lot of work through off-camera means or in my Twitch stream, so if you'd like to follow along in that manner, you can. My Twitch handle is over here to the right. But for now, thanks for checking out episode 33. Hope to see you guys soon for more progress on the base.
Next level.